I should have forbidden Edward from bringing someone who looks so common. She ruins even my photos. The golden heel rises in the air. Without hesitation, Isabella Montgomery kicks the chair where her poor mother-in-law was sitting. The impact echoes like a gunshot. Margaret Richardson staggers, 70 years old, frail body. Her calloused hands search for balance, gripping the French linen tablecloth like a drowning person clutching driftwood. 200 guests frozen. Dom Pérignon champagne flutes suspended halfway to lips. The baccarat chandeliers tremble above the Carrara marble floor. The silence cuts deeper than the humiliation. Among gowns worth thousands of dollars and jewelry that sparkles like stars, a 70-year-old woman struggles not to fall. Her navy blue dress, borrowed from a neighbor, contrasts sharply with such luxury. Her worn shoes, polished with love, touch the ground again. She straightens up, slowly, with a dignity that no amount of money can buy. But the worst part isn't the kick. The worst part is her son Edward's reaction. The man who owes everything to those silent sacrifices. The one who slept in her lap when he had fever. The one who studied on scholarship she paid for by cleaning houses exactly like this one. Edward remains motionless, as if he hadn't seen anything. The silence of a son who chose social status over maternal love. If this cruelty has already broken your heart in these first seconds, subscribe to the channel, because what's coming will be even more painful and revealing. Here we share stories that touch the soul and remind us what human dignity really means. Because this humble mother is about to do something that will forever change the lives of everyone in this golden ballroom. The worst hasn't happened yet. The echo of the kick fades, but its emotional waves are just beginning to expand through the ballroom, like ripples in a pond that grow larger and more disturbing. The symphony orchestra violins try to resume Pachelbel's melody, but the notes come out choppy, nervous. Even the professional musicians, accustomed to playing at the most exclusive events in Manhattan, are visibly disturbed by what they've just witnessed. The first violin falters on a phrase he's executed thousands of times. The pianist presses the keys with less conviction. It's as if the violence of what happened has contaminated even the music. Margaret remains standing next to her chair, which is now slightly displaced by the impact. The hand-carved wooden furniture, upholstered in French silk, is worth more than everything she has owned in her lifetime. But now it bears the mark of her humiliation, like a visible scar in the midst of such calculated perfection. Her hands, those hands that have worked tirelessly for 70 years without rest, intertwine over her modest black purse. It's the same purse she's used for the last 15 years because she's never had enough money to afford to buy another. The edges are worn, the synthetic leather has cracked at the corners, but she's cared for it like a treasure because it was a gift from Edward on her 55th birthday, when he still remembered important dates in his mother's life. But it's not the physical humiliation that's destroying her inside. It's not the pain in her shoulder where she received the impact of Isabella's shoe. It's something much deeper and more devastating, the desperate search for her son's eyes. Edward Richardson stands next to the altar of white roses, imported directly from Ecuador, imposing in his Armani tuxedo that costs more than his mother's rent for 6 complete months. His hair, perfectly styled with $200 a bottle Italian gel, reflects the lights from the $30,000 baccarat crystal chandelier hanging over the altar like an artificial constellation. His Italian leather shoes have been polished to a mirror shine. His natural silk tie was knotted by the same stylist who dresses Hollywood actors when they come to New York City. His white gold cufflinks with diamonds were an engagement gift from the Montgomery family. Every detail of his appearance screams success, sophistication, arrival at the exclusive circle of the American elite. But when Margaret's pleading eyes finally meet his, hoping for at least a word, a gesture, any sign that he still remembers who gave him life, who worked 3 jobs so he could study, who stayed awake 1,000 nights watching over his childhood fevers. Edward does something that will be impossible to forgive. He looks away toward the floor, as if the veins in the Carrara marble were suddenly more interesting than defending his own mother, as if the geological patterns formed over millions of years deserved more of his attention than the woman who shaped his character through decades of silent sacrifice. His eyes fix on the floor with the concentration of a geologist studying ancient fossils. Anything to avoid meeting the hurt gaze of the woman who brought him into the world. "Excuse this little misunderstanding," Isabella says with a smile that could freeze the flames of hell. Her soft voice, modulated by years of elocution classes in Switzerland, contrasts obscenely with the violence she just exercised without the slightest remorse. Some people simply don't understand the appropriate protocols of events of this social caliber. Her words float in the air conditioning like $1,000 an ounce French perfume mixed with snake venom. Each syllable is calculated to sound polite while driving the dagger deeper into her victim's heart. The guests exchange glances ranging from discomfort to poorly concealed horror. The ladies of Manhattan high society, with their cultured Tahitian pearl necklaces and crocodile Hermes bags, nervously adjust their jewelry as if they were amulets against a curse that has just fallen on the ballroom. The entrepreneurs from the Fortune 500 list, wrapped in their Armani and Brioni suits that cost more than an average worker's annual salary, discreetly clear their throats behind their Dom Perignon champagne glasses, as if the simple act of clearing the throat could erase what they just witnessed. Some look at their Rolex and Patek Philippe watches, pretending they have something urgent to do, some important place to go, any mental excuse to dissociate from this situation that's making them feel deeply uncomfortable. But nobody speaks. Nobody stands up in defense of a 70-year-old woman who was just publicly assaulted for the simple crime of existing in a space that doesn't want her. Nobody says, "This is wrong." Nobody pronounces the words, "You don't treat an elderly lady like this." Nobody articulates what everyone is thinking. This is barbarism disguised as social elegance. The unwritten code of high society is clear. One must not intervene in others' family settling of accounts, especially when those arrangements involve social hierarchies that everyone understands, but no one wants to openly admit. And Edward, the man who literally owes everything he has to that woman's sacrifices, who slept in her lap when he had nightmares as a child, who ate the last piece of bread because she pretended not to be hungry, who wore school uniforms washed and ironed by those now trembling hands, remains mute like a marble statue. His silence resonates louder than any cry of protest could have resonated. It's the silence of social cowardice, elevated to its maximum expression. The silence of one who consciously chose money over blood. The silence of a son who decided it was easier, more convenient, more socially acceptable to deny his roots than face the potential social shame of defending them publicly. It's the silence of one who has convinced himself that filial love and social ambition are mutually exclusive, and who has chosen the second option without considering the real emotional cost. Margaret closes her eyes for a moment that seems to last an eternity. Her eyelids, wrinkled by decades of work under the relentless New York sun, close like curtains over pain so deep it has no words in any language. When she opens them, something fundamental, something that had been at the core of her being for decades, has changed forever in her expression. As if a decision that had been gestating in the depths of her soul for months, perhaps years of small humiliations and gradual snubs, had finally crystallized in this moment of absolute pain. Her shoulders, hunched by years of carrying weights no woman her age should carry, slowly straighten. Each vertebra in her back seems to remember how to stand upright with pride. Her chin, which had fallen toward her chest under the weight of borrowed shame, rises just a few millimeters. but those millimeters contained decades of recovered dignity. And for the first time since she arrived at this golden ballroom 3 hours ago, feeling completely out of place among so much ostentatious luxury, she seems to remember something fundamental about herself. Something she had forgotten during the months of preparations for this wedding, while Edward discreetly explained to her that it would be better if she kept a low profile during the ceremony. She is not just the poor mother who gets in the way at a millionaire wedding. She is not just the uncomfortable presence that must be tolerated out of family obligation. She is Margaret Richardson, the woman who built that successful, admired and respected man with her own calloused hands and tireless heart. But what exactly is going through her mind at this crucial moment? And why is that new look in her eyes beginning to deeply worry those who observe her more carefully? 35 years ago, in a world that seemed to belong to a completely different galaxy from this luxury ballroom, those same hands that now tremble under the baccarat crystal lights were submerged in ice-cold water at 4 in the morning. It wasn't a choice. It was pure survival. House after house, step after step, bathroom after bathroom, floor after floor. Margaret scrubbed imported marble surfaces she could never dream of having in her own home. She cleaned 24-carat gold-plated toilets that cost more than what she earned in a complete year of exhausting work. She dusted antique Dominican mahogany and African ebony furniture whose value in the antique market exceeded everything she had possessed in her entire existence. She polished sterling silver candelabras that had been forged in 18th-century European workshops. She vacuumed authentic Persian rugs that had been hand-woven for decades by craftsmen she would never meet. She organized private libraries full of first editions of books she would never have time to read, because every free minute had to be invested in the next job, the next dollar earned. "You're going to study, my love," she whispered, while walking through the completely empty dawn streets of Manhattan, carrying a worn plastic bag with her cleaning uniforms that she washed herself every night to save every last cent. "I'll endure everything life puts in front of me, but you're not going to be trapped in this poverty that seems to chase us like a generational curse." Edward was then only 7 years old. He was a thin child with big, curious eyes, who waited for her awake in the kitchen of their 2-room apartment in Queens. He stayed doing homework on a white plastic table full of scratches and marks from years of intensive use, under the flickering light of a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling like an interrogation lamp. The apartment was tiny. The living room and dining room were the same space. The kitchen was so small that 2 people couldn't fit at the same time. The bathroom had a shower that worked intermittently and a cracked mirror that distorted reflections. But for Edward it was home, because his mother was there every night, no matter how exhausted she returned from work. They ate rice and beans for dinner. Every day, breakfast, lunch and dinner, rice and beans with different variations. Sometimes with a scrambled egg when there was extra money, occasionally with a small piece of chicken on Sundays if the week had been particularly good in tips. But she always, without exception, served him the largest portion, inventing creative excuses that he, in his childish innocence, believed completely. "Did you already eat at work, Mom?" "Yes, my beautiful boy. I ate so much. They even gave me dessert. I'm not hungry at all, not at all." Pious lie, number 1463. Her stomach roared like a hungry animal, contracting in spasms that doubled her over in pain when Edward wasn't looking. But every dollar she saved on her own food was a dollar that was religiously added to the sacred fund for Edward's private education. On Sundays, when other children his age went to movies with their parents or visited amusement parks or ate at family restaurants, Margaret took Edward to the New York Public Library. "Books don't cost anything, my love," she explained as they climbed the monumental stairs of that cathedral of knowledge. "And with them, you can travel anywhere in the world, know any story, live 1,000 different lives without paying a single cent." He read adventures of pirates and explorers while she sewed beside him at the silent study tables. Blouses for the market ladies, dresses for quinceañera parties in the neighborhood, tablecloths for local diners, napkins for budget restaurants. Anything they would pay her to do, no matter how complex the work or how poorly paid it was. Her fingers filled with constant pinpricks. The needle betrayed her when fatigue overcame her after 18 consecutive hours of work. Sometimes she bled directly onto the white fabric and had to wash it completely again, losing precious hours of sleep. But never ever, under any circumstances, did she allow herself a complaint. Complaining was a luxury she couldn't afford. When Edward turned 14 and came home crying inconsolably because his high school classmates mercilessly mocked his completely worn-out sneakers with holes in the soles and canvas discolored by years of use, she made a decision that literally broke her soul in two. She sold her only jewelry, a silver ring with a small blue stone that had belonged to her mother, who died when Edward was 3 years old. It was the only thing she kept from her family, the last physical tie to a mother who had died too young, leaving her completely alone in the world with a son to raise. "Pretty shoes won't make you smarter, my Edward," she told him that night while counting the bills they had given her at the pawn shop, knowing she would never have enough money to get the ring back. "But if you need to feel secure and confident to study better, to concentrate on your classes without the distraction of shame, then this sacrifice was worth every cent." During the cold nights of January and February, when New York City becomes a giant refrigerator and the air cuts like knives, and when they didn't have money to pay for the boiler gas because they had to choose between hot water and electricity, she developed a nighttime routine that Edward never knew about. She got up every exact hour throughout the night to check that he was well covered. She took off her own blanket, the only one they had besides his, and put it on top of him carefully so as not to wake him, leaving herself shivering until dawn in underwear on a mattress that had known better decades. "I'm not cold, my love. Sleep peacefully," she whispered if he woke up and asked why she was awake. Another pious lie. Her teeth chattered like an old typewriter, but her son's comfort and restorative sleep were infinitely more important than any physical discomfort she might experience. When Edward was accepted to Columbia University, the most prestigious, most expensive, most exclusive private university in the state, with tuitions equivalent to entire families' annual salaries, she didn't think twice. "You're going," she told him, with a determination that admitted no discussion. "It doesn't matter what I have to do. It doesn't matter how much I have to work. You're going to study at that university, and you're going to be the professional you deserve to be." And she kept her promise with a dedication that bordered on the superhuman. She worked 20 hours daily for 5 consecutive years, no vacations, no rest days, no sick leave, no excuses of any kind. Domestic employee from 5 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon in the most elegant houses on the Upper East Side. Seamstress from 3 in the afternoon to 9 at night in a clandestine workshop in downtown Manhattan where they paid her per finished piece. Sandwich and coffee vendor from 10 at night to 2 in the morning at the subway stations. Under rain, cold, suffocating heat, pollution that burned her lungs. 3 hours of sleep each night if she was lucky. 7 days a week for 5 years. No Christmas vacations, no birthday celebrations, no free time for herself. Her hands were permanently deformed by constant, relentless work. The calluses became so thick and hard, they looked like small stones embedded in her skin. Her back curved so much she could no longer straighten completely, not even when making conscious efforts. Her grey hair appeared literally overnight, as if her body had decided to show externally all the accumulated fatigue she systematically refused to admit or express verbally. She developed arthritis in her knees from so many hours standing. Her feet swelled permanently from walking miles daily on hard pavement. Her eyes weakened from sewing for hours under poor lighting. But every time Edward came home with good grades, with academic recognition, with news of partial scholarships or honorable mentions, she smiled as if she had won the lottery. "My son is going to be an important professional," she told her neighbors on the building's rooftop with genuine pride, while hanging clothes she washed by hand because they didn't have a washing machine. "He's going to have the life I was never able to give myself. He's going to live in a different world from ours." And she achieved it. Edward graduated summa cum laude with honors. He immediately got a job at a multinational corporation that paid in dollars. He began dressing differently, in suits that cost more than his mother's monthly salary. Speaking differently, incorporating English words and cultural references she didn't understand. Living in neighborhoods his mother only knew from having cleaned them for decades. And little by little, so gradually that neither of them fully realized what was happening, he began spacing out his visits. Phone calls became shorter, more formal, more sporadic. Excuses multiplied, important meetings, business trips, social commitments with important people from his new circle. Until one day, at a corporate event in one of the city's most exclusive hotels, he met Isabella Montgomery. And there, at that precise moment, everything changed forever. But what exactly happened in that first encounter between Edward and Isabella? And how did a romantic relationship that began with romantic promises become the reason for denying 30 years of maternal sacrifice? 30 minutes after the incident, when the waiters have served the first course and conversations have resumed an almost normal level, Isabella decides her message still hasn't been sufficiently clear. She approaches the microphone with the calculated grace of a snake that has identified its prey. Her heels tap on the marble like raindrops on crystal, creating a hypnotic rhythm that keeps all the guests in suspense. The microphone squeaks slightly when she takes it in her perfectly manicured hands. Her nails, decorated with Swarovski crystals in the shape of tears, capture and reflect the lights like small prisms of cruelty. "Dear family and friends," she begins with a melodious voice that doesn't quite hide the sharp edge lurking beneath. "I hope you're enjoying this very special evening." The guests raise their glasses mechanically, but there's something in Isabella's tone that keeps them alert. Those who have known her since childhood recognize that particular voice modulation. It's the same one she used at the Swiss private school when she was about to socially destroy some classmate who had offended her. "As you know, today we celebrate not only the love between Edward and me, but also the union of two worlds that until recently seemed completely separate." Strategic pause. Her green gaze deliberately slides toward Margaret, who has remained motionless next to the marble column throughout dinner, like a grey shadow amid so much golden colour. "My dear Edward," she continues, directing a smile that doesn't reach her eyes toward her husband, "has taught me that sometimes love takes us down unexpected paths. Paths that connect us with realities very different from our own." Edward shifts uncomfortably in his chair. Something in his wife's tone is making his skin crawl. He knows that voice. It's the same one she uses when she's planning something he prefers not to know about. "During our courtship, Edward told me fascinating stories about his childhood, stories about a time very different from what we live now in these elegant ballrooms, surrounded by everything life can offer." Isabella's smile becomes wider, more dangerous. Stories about small apartments, about multiple jobs, about sacrifices a mother is willing to make for her son. Margaret, who had been following the conversation with growing alarm, feels as if the ballroom's air had become denser. Her hands grip her purse more tightly. "And I must confess something." Isabella lowers her voice conspiratorially, forcing all guests to lean slightly forward to hear her. "At first those stories seemed quaint to me, even touching." A nervous murmur runs through the tables. Edward's college friends exchange uncomfortable glances. Some of them had personally known Margaret from the times when Edward wasn't yet ashamed of his origins. But as our relationship deepened, as we began planning our future together, I realized something very important. Dramatic pause. The silence in the ballroom is so deep, you can hear the hum of the crystal lights. I realize there's a big difference between appreciating where you come from and allowing that past to define who you are now. The words float in the air conditioning like daggers wrapped in silk. Edward and I represent America's new generation. A generation that doesn't conform to the limitations of the past, but builds the future with vision, with ambition, with elevated standards. Her voice gains strength, authority. Every word is carefully chosen to sound inspiring while driving the knife deeper. That's why, although we will always respect my husband's humble origins, we also understand that our role now is different. We are social leaders. We are examples for the new generations. Alexander Montgomery nods with pride from the main table. His daughter is perfectly executing the speech they had rehearsed, a speech designed to establish clear hierarchies without sounding directly cruel. And social leaders have responsibilities. We have to maintain certain standards, certain forms, certain appropriate distances from elements that could, how to say it delicately, compromise the image we must project. Edward feels as if the ground is opening beneath his feet. He wants to get up, wants to stop her, but he's paralyzed by a mixture of horror and social cowardice that prevents him from moving. It's not about being cruel or insensitive, Isabella continues, her voice now loaded with a false compassion that results more offensive than direct cruelty. It's about being realistic about the world we live in. Her eyes fixed directly on Margaret for the first time since she began the speech. A world where certain people, no matter how good their intentions, simply don't fit. A world where the presence of discordant elements can create uncomfortable situations for everyone involved. The silence that follows is so dense it could be cut with a knife. Some guests look at their plates, others exchange nervous glances. The waiters have stopped serving and remain motionless in the corners of the ballroom. That's why, Isabella raises her Dom Perignon champagne glass, I want to propose a toast to the future, to our ability to honor the past without allowing it to limit us, to our wisdom in recognizing when it's time to evolve. The word evolve comes out of her mouth like a bullet aimed directly at Margaret's heart. To our love, which is strong enough to make difficult decisions when necessary to protect what really matters. Our future together, without the unnecessary complications of the past. The applause that follows is sporadic, forced, uncomfortable, like the sound of water drops falling on rusted metal. Most guests applaud out of social obligation, not conviction. But while the echo of that lukewarm applause fades in the air, perfumed with Ecuadorian roses, something extraordinary is beginning to happen in the corner where Margaret remains. Her hands, which had been trembling throughout the speech, gradually stabilize. Her shoulders, which had sunk under the weight of each cruel word, slowly begin to straighten. And in her brown eyes, the same ones that watched over 1,000 nights of childhood fever and 1,000 dawns of study, something that had been sleeping for too long begins to shine. It's not pain that shines there. It's not humiliation. It's something much more dangerous for those who have built their power on the humiliation of others. It's dignity awakening. Will this be the moment when that dignity fully awakens? Or will she continue to remain silent to preserve the illusion of her son's happiness? Margaret's steps on the Carrara marble sound like a ceremonial drum announcing the beginning of a revolution no one saw coming. Step, decision. Step, dignity. Step, justice. The whispered conversations fade like smoke in the wind. Silver cutlery is suspended halfway between plates and lips. Even the symphony orchestra, formed by the best musicians from the New York Philharmonic, allows their performance to fade until it becomes a whisper. Each step she takes is a declaration. Each movement, an affirmation that something fundamental has changed in the power dynamic of this golden ballroom. The guests watch her with a mixture of curiosity and growing alarm. Throughout the night, this older woman had been invisible to them, an uncomfortable presence they preferred to ignore. But now, as she walks toward the stage with a determination that cuts through the air like a sword, it's impossible not to see her. Isabella, who had just handed the microphone to the master of ceremonies with the satisfaction of one who has perfectly executed a social demolition, freezes when she sees the older woman heading toward the stage. For the first time all evening, there's something in Margaret's expression that sets off all the alarms in the millionaire bride's calculating mind. The silent submission has disappeared. The shame has been replaced by something much more dangerous: determination. "Excuse me, sir," Margaret says to the master of ceremonies, with a voice that, although trembling slightly, carries a weight of moral authority that cuts through luxury like a ray of sunlight through clouds. "Could you allow me to use the microphone for a moment?" The master of ceremonies, an elegant man with 3 decades of experience handling the most exclusive events in the country, nervously looks toward the main table where the Montgomerys watch him with expressions ranging from alarm to absolute panic. Alexander makes discreet but desperate gestures for him to deny the request. Sophia fans herself nervously, as if she had suddenly started sweating inside her French designer dress. "Ma'am, I really don't think this is the most appropriate time for—" "Please." Margaret's voice breaks slightly, but her eyes remain firm as steel tempered in a forge. "I just need a minute, just 1 minute to clarify some things I believe have been misunderstood tonight." Edward rises from his chair next to the altar as if he had received a 1,000-volt electric shock. His face, which had maintained a healthy color throughout the ceremony, turns the color of melted candle wax. His hands, perfectly cared for, thanks to weekly manicures at the most exclusive spa in Manhattan, manicures that cost more than what his mother spends on food during a month, tremble visibly. For the first time in months, perhaps years, he seems to remember exactly who the woman approaching the microphone is. She's not just the uncomfortable mother who had to be tolerated. She's Margaret Richardson, the woman who worked 3 jobs for 5 years to pay for his university education. "Mom," he whispers, but his voice is lost in the immensity of the ballroom perfumed with imported orchids. Isabella rises from her chair with a movement so abrupt she almost spills her champagne glass on her $40,000 dress. Her green eyes, normally controlled and calculating like those of a patient predator, show a spark of real fear. "What do you think you're doing?" she hisses to the master of ceremonies with a voice low enough that the closest guests can't hear her, but poisonous enough for him to understand that his contract, and probably his professional reputation, depends on his answer. But Margaret no longer waits for anyone's permission. With a movement that has the naturalness of one who has finally found her moment in history, she extends her wrinkled hand, hardened by decades of work, toward the microphone. The master of ceremonies, caught between the fierce pressure of the Montgomerys and something indefinable but deeply powerful in this older woman's presence, hesitates for a second that proves crucial. A second that is enough for her to take the microphone with the naturalness of one who has been waiting her entire life for this moment of truth. The sharp feedback produced by the sound system when she adjusts the microphone to her height resonates throughout the ballroom like the war cry of an ancient goddess awakening from a millennial dream. 200 people hold their breath simultaneously. The silence is so deep, you can hear the electric hum of the baccarat crystal lights, the distant murmur of air conditioning, even the collective beating of 200 hearts that have begun to beat faster. Margaret settles in front of the microphone, taking a moment to observe the ballroom with eyes that have seen too much of the world to be intimidated by luxury. Her hands, those hands that have scrubbed, sewn, cooked, consoled, and built a future with pure love. Grip the microphone stand like anchors in a storm. The seconds stretch like hours. The tension in the air is so dense that some guests feel difficulty breathing. When she finally speaks, her voice reaches every corner of the ballroom with crystalline clarity that makes even the waiters in the kitchen stop working to listen. Good evening. 2 words, simple, direct, but loaded with a moral authority that no university degree, no millionaire bank account, no aristocratic surname can ever buy. The silence that follows is different from all the previous silences of the night. It's not the uncomfortable silence of witnessed humiliation. It's not the calculating silence of those evaluating social damage. It's the reverential silence of those who intuit in the depths of their being that they're about to witness something they will remember for the rest of their lives. What is this woman going to say, who has remained silent for 70 years of small and large injustices? And how will 200 millionaires react when they hear truths they have never wanted to face? My name is Margaret Richardson. The voice extends through the ballroom like honey poured over fine crystal, clear, measured, infinitely dignified, each syllable pronounced with the precision of one who has rehearsed these words in her mind for years, without knowing that someday she would have the opportunity and the need to speak them. I am 70 years old. I have been widowed for 28 years, and I am Edward Richardson's mother. A pause that allows each word to settle in the collective consciousness of the ballroom. In the absolute silence that follows, you can hear the collective beating of 200 hearts that have begun to beat in unison. For the last 40 minutes, I have been sitting in silence, listening to very elegant words about adaptation, about social protocols, and about the need to maintain appropriate distances between worlds that are apparently incompatible. Her eyes slowly scanned the ballroom, stopping at each face, recording each expression in a memory that has learned to retain what's important and forget what's not worth remembering. I have heard talk about evolution, about leaving the past behind, about discordant elements that can create uncomfortable situations. Her voice remains serene, but there's a steel edge that begins to manifest in each word. And I have wondered throughout this time, who exactly decides what behavior is appropriate? Who establishes that one world is worth more than another? Who determines what standards we all must follow? Alexander Montgomery makes an urgent gesture toward the event's security chief, but his wife stops him with a subtle but firm hand movement. Something in this older woman's magnetic presence has completely paralyzed her. "Allow me to tell you a story," Margaret continues, and there's something in her tone that makes even the most distracted guests direct their complete attention to her. It's the story of a boy who was born in a 2-room apartment in Queens 33 years ago. Edward, from his place next to the altar, begins to cry silently. These aren't tears of shame now. They're tears of recognition, of recovered memory, of filial love that had been buried under years of social ambition and fear of others' judgment. That boy came home crying because his schoolmates made fun of his lunchbox. It was an empty cookie tin that I had lined with gift paper to make it look pretty, because I didn't have money to buy a real lunchbox. Her voice breaks imperceptibly on that last phrase, but continues with a strength that seems to spring from some infinite well inside her. That boy asked me one day, "Mom, why are we poor?" And I told him something I believed with all my soul then, and I still believe now. We're not poor, my love. We just have fewer material things, but we have something that all the money in the world can't buy. We have each other, and that's worth more than any wealth. An emotional murmur runs through the tables. Some guests, especially those with young children, feel a knot forming in their throats. For 22 consecutive years, Margaret's voice gains strength, like a river finding its course after years of drought. I worked 18 hours daily, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, so that boy could have the opportunity to get an education. She stops, allowing the magnitude of that statement to settle in the minds of those listening. I cleaned houses exactly like this one, where Persian rugs cost more than my complete annual salary. I scrubbed marble floors like the one we're standing on, knowing I could never afford to have one in my home. I sewed until my fingers bled on the fabric, working under a table lamp because we didn't have money for better lighting. Her voice gradually rises, gaining a resonance that makes the crystal glasses on the tables vibrate. I sold sandwiches at subway stations until my feet filled with sores and my legs swelled like balloons. I walked miles under the midday sun and under January's freezing rain, carrying bags of dirty clothes to wash in other people's houses. The specific, raw and real details create a brutal contrast with the luxury surrounding all those present. Some guests begin to feel uncomfortable, not from social humiliation, but from something much deeper, confrontation with a reality they had chosen to ignore their entire lives. And do you know what I discovered during all those years, cleaning the most elegant houses in this city? The pause that follows seems to last an eternity. I discovered that the richest people in the world can have the shiniest floors, the most luxurious rooms, the most beautiful gardens, but they can have completely opaque hearts, completely empty. A nervous murmur runs through the tables. Some guests exchange uncomfortable glances. Others look toward their plates, unable to sustain the direct gaze of this woman who is laying bare truths no one wants to face. I discovered that you can have all the university education in the world, all the degrees and recognitions possible, and still be profoundly ignorant about what really matters in life. Isabella tries to approach the microphone, intending to stop what is clearly becoming something much more dangerous than a simple response to her humiliation. But her father stops her with a look she recognizes immediately. Alexander, with all his experience in high-level business, recognizes when a situation has reached a point of no return. Any attempt to silence this woman now will only exponentially worsen things. During those years of work, Margaret continues, now completely owning the space and the moment, I learned something that no university teaches, that no social protocol manual mentions, that no bank account can provide. Her voice now resonates with the authority of a prophet pronouncing eternal truths. I learned that true elegance isn't in how you dress or what car you drive. It's in how you treat those who can do nothing for you. True education isn't in how many languages you speak or how many degrees you have on the wall. It's in your ability to recognize the humanity in every person you meet. Wow, how will the guests react when they hear what comes next? And what will Edward do now that his mother is revealing truths he had chosen to bury? Tonight, Margaret's voice rises to fill every inch of the ballroom with a resonance that makes the baccarat crystal chandeliers tinkle softly. A young, beautiful woman, educated in the world's finest schools, kicked me in front of 200 people. The silence that follows is so absolute, it seems solid, tangible, as if the air itself had turned to crystal. But that, believe me, is not what has hurt me most tonight. Edward collapses completely in his chair. His sobs are now audible to everyone present. Broken, heartbreaking, born from the depths of a heart that has just recognized the magnitude of his betrayal. What hurts me most, Margaret continues, with a voice that breaks but doesn't shatter, is that my son, the boy for whom I sacrificed my youth, my health, my dreams, my entire life, remained silent while they publicly humiliated me. The words fall on the ballroom like drops of acid on silk. Some guests can't help but turn toward Edward, who now has his head buried in his hands, crying with a desperation that breaks the heart of anyone who observes him. But I want to tell this family, so educated, so refined, so appropriate according to their own standards, something. Margaret straightens completely. For the first time in decades, she recovers every inch of height that life had stolen from her. Her 70 years transform into pure presence, into embodied dignity. If my son is standing today, it's because I knelt for 30 years to clean other people's houses and wash clothes that weren't mine. Her voice now resonates like a cathedral bell, each word reverberating on the marble walls. If he can read and write with the elegance that impresses you so much, it's because I worked under the relentless midday sun and under January's freezing rain to buy each of his books. The guests begin to show visible signs of emotion. Some of the older ladies, who perhaps remember more difficult times in their own families, have tears running down their carefully made-up cheeks. If he can speak with the propriety and vocabulary you so admire in your social circles, it's because I remained silent for years, working in silence, so he could study in peace without the distractions of our economic problems. Edward rises tremblingly from his chair. Each step he takes toward his mother is a year of emotional neglect. Each movement is an apology he should have made long ago. If he can stand in this elegant ballroom, dressed in those expensive clothes, it's because I wore the same clothes for years to save every dollar that could be destined for his education and his future. Margaret's voice becomes an unstoppable torrent of pure truth. Money can buy Italian shoes like the ones he wears. It can buy designer suits like the one he's wearing. It can buy French champagne like what you're drinking. It can buy symphony orchestras like the one that has delighted us tonight. The pause that follows seems to last a cosmic eternity. But there's something that all the money in the world can never, ever buy. Dignity. The word floats in the perfumed air like a blessing and a condemnation simultaneously. Edward reaches his mother, and without caring that 200 people are watching him, without considering the professional cameras capturing every second, without thinking about his social reputation or professional consequences, he kneels before her on the cold marble. "Forgive me, Mom," he says with a voice broken by years of repressed emotions. "Forgive me, please. Forgive me for being a coward. Forgive me for denying everything you gave me. Forgive me for allowing them to humiliate you without defending you." Margaret slowly lowers her hand to touch her son's head. Her fingers, rough from work but infinitely tender, slide through the perfectly styled hair that is now damp with tears. "Edward," she whispers, and in that simple word are contained 30 years of unconditional love, of frustrated hopes, of inexhaustible forgiveness. "You are my son. You will always be my son." And a mother's love is not earned or lost. It simply exists. But Margaret isn't finished yet. She turns back to the microphone with her son kneeling beside her and speaks the words that will change the course of this evening forever. "I may be poor, according to this ballroom's standards. You can mock my borrowed dress, my worn shoes, my calloused hands, and my accent that betrays my humble origins." Her voice rises to reach every corner of the ballroom. "But I bring with me something that you, with all your wealth, with all your degrees, with all your contacts and bank accounts, can never buy or possess." The pause that follows is so charged with expectation, it seems the air itself might explode. "I bring with me the dignity of one who builds instead of destroys, of one who lifts up instead of humiliates, of one who loves without conditions and without asking for anything in return." A timid applause begins at some distant table. It's barely audible at first, but begins to grow like an unstoppable wave. Edward's university professors, who had known the real story of his social ascension, are the first to stand. Their faces show a mixture of admiration and shame for having remained silent for so long. "And I want you to know something else," Margaret continues, now completely owning the moment. "Something that is fundamental for you to understand." She turns directly toward Isabella, looking her in the eyes for the first time all evening. "You can kick me all the times you want. You can humiliate me, despise me, treat me as if I were invisible or as if my presence were a stain on your social perfection." Her voice becomes pure steel. But never, never will you be able to change the fact that without me, without my sacrifices, without my unconditional love, without my 30 years of silent work, the man you married tonight would not exist. The applause grows exponentially. Table after table, guests join in. It's not the polite, measured applause that followed Isabella's venomous speech. This applause has soul. It has tears. It has the universal recognition of maternal sacrifice that transcends any social class barrier. Edward stands slowly, still with tears running down his cheeks, and approaches the microphone. His face shows a determination he hasn't shown in years. "I want to say something," he announces, and gradually the applause fades until it becomes expectant silence. He first addresses Isabella, who watches him with a mixture of incredulity and growing terror. For the first time since she's known him, there's something in Edward's eyes that she can't manipulate or control. "Isabella," he says with a voice that has recovered a firmness it had lost long ago, "for months you asked me to keep distance from my origins. You repeatedly told me that my past wasn't appropriate for your social circle, and I, cowardly, accepted each of your conditions." The words fall on the ballroom like raindrops after years of drought. "You convinced me I should be ashamed of the woman who gave me life. You made me believe that filial love and social ambition were incompatible. You turned me into someone I no longer recognize." He turns toward the microphone to address all the guests present. "But today, tonight, you have shown me exactly who you really are, and you have forced me to remember who I am deep down." His voice rises, gaining a strength that surprises even himself. "I am the son of a woman who worked 3 jobs simultaneously for years to give me an education. I am the product of 1,000 sleepless nights, of thousands of silent sacrifices, of a love so deep and so pure that no university in the world taught me to understand or value it adequately." The applause returns, stronger than before. Some guests stand up, moved by the brutal authenticity of this public confession. "I am the result of hands that worked until they bled so I could have books. I am the fruit of a back that curved cleaning other people's houses so I could study law. I am the son of a woman who never had vacations, who never bought herself new clothes, who never gave herself a luxury, because every extra dollar meant an additional opportunity for my future." Edward takes his mother's hand and lifts it for everyone to see. "And if all of that isn't elegant enough for some of you, if my story makes you uncomfortable, if my mother's presence embarrasses you, then this isn't my wedding either." He turns directly toward Isabella, who remains motionless like a statue of salt. "If you can't respect my mother, you can't respect me. And if you can't respect the love and sacrifices that brought me here, then you can't truly love the person I am." The words resonate in the ballroom with the finality of a judicial sentence. "Everything I am, everything I've achieved, everything that made me the man you said you fell in love with, I owe completely to her." He points toward his mother, who remains next to the microphone with a dignity that illuminates the entire space like a lighthouse in the darkness. "That's why, Mom," he says, turning toward Margaret, "would you accompany me home? We have 30 years of pending conversations, 30 years of hugs I didn't give you, 30 years of gratitude I never adequately expressed." Margaret smiles through her tears. It's the first genuine, radiant, completely free smile she's shown all evening. "With all the pleasure in the world, son, with all the pleasure in the world." As mother and son walk toward the ballroom exit, arm in arm with a naturalness that speaks of years of deep love finally reunited, applause accompanies them like a choral blessing. Guests stand one after another, some dry tears they didn't expect to shed at a millionaire wedding. Others smile with a warmth they hadn't felt at social events of this type in years. Even some of the ballroom employees, waiters, musicians, security staff applaud discreetly from their positions, moved by having witnessed something authentic in a world where authenticity is a precious rarity. Isabella remains alone next to the altar of imported white roses, surrounded by luxury that suddenly seems empty, cold, meaningless. Her $40,000 dress, her inherited jewelry, her perfect hairstyle, all seem to have lost meaning in a matter of minutes. Her father, Alexander, watches her from the main table with an expression that mixes disappointment and business calculation. In his mind, he's already evaluating the social cost of this debacle, the calls he'll have to make, the explanations he'll have to give. But in this moment, in this ballroom, full of people who have just witnessed a lesson about the true value of things, all of that seems secondary. What will happen after tonight? Will mother and son be able to completely rebuild the relationship that was about to be lost forever? And how will this experience change their lives in the years to come? The morning sun, on an ordinary Tuesday, filters through the white linen curtains of the small cafe Margaret's Corner in Brooklyn Heights. It's a simple but cozy place, with reclaimed wood tables, hanging plants that purify the air, and the permanent aroma of freshly ground coffee that mixes harmoniously with the soft sound of authentic conversations. At the table by the window overlooking the tree-lined street, a 75-year-old woman with completely white hair but more vivacious eyes than ever quietly reads the newspaper while having breakfast of whole-grain toast with homemade strawberry jam. Her dress is simple but good quality. Her shoes comfortable but elegant in their simplicity. There's a deep serenity in her face, a peace that speaks of battles won not against others, but against the resentment and bitterness that could have consumed her heart. "Good morning, Mrs. Margaret," greets Carlos, the young waiter who has been working at the cafe since it opened 3 years ago. "How are you today?" "Very well, Carlos. Thank you for asking." "And your mum? Did she feel better from her cold?" "Yes, Mum. Your herbal teas worked perfectly. She says to send you many regards and that she has the mole recipe you asked for ready." Margaret smiles with the genuine warmth of one who has learned that authentic human connections are life's true luxury. She folds the newspaper just as the cafe door opens with the familiar sound of the bronze bell that Edward personally installed on opening day. A 38-year-old man enters with light steps, carrying a worn canvas backpack and an expression of genuine happiness that illuminates his entire face. "Good morning, Mom. Sorry for being 5 minutes late. I got held up saying goodbye to the kids at school." Edward kisses his mother's forehead with a tenderness that has become as natural as breathing before sitting across from her in the chair that's always reserved for him. He no longer wears Italian suits worth thousands of dollars. His clothing is casual but careful. Good quality jeans, a cotton shirt in a blue that enhances his eyes, comfortable shoes that speak of someone who walks a lot by choice, not necessity. He looks 10 years younger than that night in the Midtown ballroom, as if he had recovered not only emotional health, but also something essential in his soul that had been lost for years. "Don't worry, son. I always prefer to arrive early. I like watching how the city wakes up. It's their sacred breakfast. Every Tuesday, for the last 5 years, without fail, without excuses, they meet at this same cafe that Edward bought and put in his mother's name a year after that night that changed their lives." "How's the housing project in Queens going?" asks Margaret, while Edward orders his usual coffee, Americano without sugar with a touch of cinnamon, from the waiter. "Incredibly well, Mom. Yesterday we signed the final contracts. 50 families will be able to access their first home of their own through the microcredit program, and the foundation approved the budget to extend the project to Boston and Philadelphia next year." Edward smiles with a pride completely different from what he used to show when talking about his past corporate achievements. It's the clean pride of one who has found a purpose that transcends personal benefit. After that transformative night, he had immediately resigned from his executive position at the multinational corporation. With his savings and the sale of everything he had bought during his years of empty social ambition, he founded Dignified Homes, a non-governmental organization dedicated to facilitating access to dignified housing for working families with modest incomes. He doesn't earn even a tenth of what he earned at his previous job. His current apartment is a fraction of the size of the penthouse he once considered indispensable for his status. His car is used, functional, without a prestigious brand to impress anyone, and he had never been happier in his life. It makes me very happy, Edward. Your father would be proud to see you like this, helping families like ours once was. It's the first time in a long while that Margaret mentions her husband, who died when Edward was only 5 years old. The deep healing of their mother-son relationship has allowed many beautiful memories buried under years of pain and resentment to resurface without the thorns of the past. "Mom," says Edward after a moment while Carlos brings him his steaming coffee, "I wanted to ask you something I've been thinking about for weeks. Tell me, son, do you ever regret having spoken that night? I know it was tremendously painful for you. I know you had to expose your private life, your sacrifices, in front of people who didn't necessarily deserve to know your story." Margaret sets her coffee cup on the table carefully and looks out the window toward the street full of ordinary people doing ordinary and extraordinary things at the same time. Workers on their way to their jobs with dignity in every step. Students carrying books with dreams in their eyes, mothers taking children to school with unconditional love in every gesture. "Do you know what's the only thing I really regret, Edward?" "What, Mom?" "Having waited so many years to tell the truth, having allowed fear and the false idea of not ruining your happiness to keep me silent while you got lost in a world that was emptying you from the inside." Edward takes his mother's hand on the table. It's a hand that shows the marks of 75 years of authentic life, of honest work, of love given without reservations. "That night you taught me something that no business school, no professional mentor, no self-help book had ever taught me." "What did I teach you, son?" "You taught me that true wealth isn't in what you have accumulated in bank accounts or properties. It's in what you're capable of giving without expecting anything in return. You taught me that authentic dignity is the only thing no one can take from you, unless you voluntarily allow them to." Margaret squeezes her son's hand with a strength that belies her age. "Life taught me something very simple, Edward. We can lose many things in this existence. We can lose money, jobs, houses, social status, even people we love deeply. But if we preserve our dignity, our ability to love without conditions, and our ability to see the good in every human being we meet, then never, never will we be truly poor." They finish their breakfast among conversations about the Foundation's projects, about the neighbors in the neighborhood where Margaret now lives, about plans for the weekend that always include time together. Simple conversations that become extraordinary when shared with genuine love and consciously dedicated time. As they get up to leave, Edward has a meeting with potential investors to expand the housing programs, and Margaret has her weekly reading class for seniors at the community center. They hug as they have done every Tuesday for 5 years. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for teaching me what really matters. And I love you, son. Always. No matter what happens." As Edward walks toward the door, Margaret remains a moment longer at the table, watching through the window how her son walks away down the street with sure steps, with clear purpose, with his head held high not from arrogance, but from recovered dignity. In her cloth bag, handmade by a women's cooperative that the Foundation supports, she keeps a photograph she always carries with her. It's not a photo from that millionaire wedding that ended in social scandal. It's a photo taken 2 weeks after that night. Edward and her sitting in the small kitchen of the Queen's apartment she never abandoned, sharing a plate of pasta and beans and smiling as if it were the most exquisite banquet in the world. Because it had turned out to be exactly that. True abundance, the wealth that no economic crisis can snatch away, the happiness that no bank account can guarantee. This story reminds us of something our modern society has dangerously forgotten. In a world obsessed with appearances, with social status, and with constant material accumulation, the most valuable thing we can possess remains completely invisible to the eyes, but evident to the heart. A mother's unconditional love that never asks for anything in return. The dignity that comes from knowing who we really are, regardless of what others think of us. The moral courage to defend what is right, even if it costs us everything we thought was important. Margaret taught us that you can take someone's money, their house, their job, their social status, but there's one thing no one can steal from you, your dignity, that you have to surrender voluntarily, and when you surrender it, you lose something that no material wealth can replace. Edward showed us that it's never too late to remember where you come from, to honor those who formed you with silent sacrifice, and to consciously choose to be the person you really want to be, not the one others expect you to be. He reminded us that true success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give, not by how many people admire you, but by how many lives you can positively impact, not by how high you rise, but by how many people you help lift up along the way. What sacrifice did your mother, your father, or someone you love make for you that you can never forget? What moment of unconditional love marked your life forever? Tell us in the comments your story of love without conditions, your memory of someone who sacrificed so you could have better opportunities. If this story touched something deep in your heart, if it made you remember someone who deserves your gratitude, give it a like and share it with that special person who needs to know how much you value what they did for you. And subscribe to our channel, because here we will continue sharing stories that remind us of the best of humanity. Stories that inspire us to be better children, better parents, better human beings every day. Because at the end of the day, when it comes time to take stock of our existence, it won't matter how many zeros you had in the bank. It won't matter what brand of car you drove or what neighborhood you lived in. The only thing that will really matter is how much love you were able to give without asking for anything in return, and how much dignity you managed to preserve in the process. See you in the next story, and remember, true wealth has always been and always will be in the heart.